My name is Megan Foster, and I'm a tattoo artist. I'm 41 now, but this story takes me back to when I was 29. I'd been tattooing professionally for almost 8 years when everything changed. I died from a drug overdose, and what Jesus showed me on the other side shattered everything I thought I knew about tattoos, about marks, and about what it truly means to belong to Him. I need to tell you what happened because it's not just about tattoos. It's about every Christian who thinks they can mark themselves however they want without spiritual consequences. What I saw was real, and I can't stay silent about it anymore. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. The day I died started like any other day. It was a Tuesday in October. I had appointments booked all morning and planned to spend the evening alone in my apartment. I'd been using painkillers for about a year by then, no longer prescribed. What started after a back injury had turned into a quiet addiction. No one really knew how bad it was. I hid it well. I'd even gone to rehab once, came out, and told everyone I was fine. But I wasn't. That night, I mixed a handful of pills with vodka. I don't even know why. Maybe I just wanted to escape. Escape the emptiness, the feeling that my life wasn't what it should be, the quiet voice inside whispering that there was more to faith than how I was living. I remember sitting on my couch as my vision blurred. I thought about calling someone, but I couldn't move. Then everything went black. But the blackness didn't last long. What happened next is what I need to tell you about. I wasn't in my body anymore. That's the first thing I knew. I could see my apartment from above, see my body slumped on the couch, see the empty bottles on the coffee table. I wasn't scared. I should have been, but I wasn't. There was this pull, this sensation of being drawn upward, and I went with it. The light came first as a distant glow, then it surrounded me completely. It wasn't like turning on a light switch. It was more like being enveloped in something alive, something that knew me and welcomed me even though I didn't deserve it. The next thing I understood was that I was standing, or the spiritual equivalent of standing, in front of Jesus. He was just there. I don't know how else to describe it. He didn't materialize or appear in stages. He simply was standing in front of me, and I knew it was Him. His eyes were the thing that got me first. They weren't angry or disappointed. They were full of compassion and sorrow. He looked at me like He knew everything about me, every lie I'd told, every tattoo I'd gotten without thinking about its spiritual weight, every time I'd half believed in Him while living like He didn't matter. I fell to my knees. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I was completely undone in His presence. Jesus said to me, "Megan, you carry marks on your skin that you don't understand." Those words hit me harder than anything physical ever could. My first instinct was to defend myself. I wanted to say that my tattoos meant things, that they represented my journey, my faith, my identity as an artist. But before I could speak, He raised His hand slightly, and every justification I was forming just dissolved. It was like He already knew every explanation I was going to give. Then something happened that I'll never forget. Jesus showed me myself in a way I'd never seen before. It wasn't a reflection. It was like I was seeing my body from a spiritual perspective, from heaven's perspective. My skin was glowing faintly, but across that glow were patterns. Some of my tattoos radiated with light. Others pulsed with distortion and confusion. And one of them, a small abstract symbol on my wrist that I designed myself years ago, it was burning with something dark. I stared at it in horror because I suddenly remembered what that symbol meant. When I was 23 and going through a rebellious phase, I designed it based on something I'd found in an occult design book. I didn't believe in the occult at that time. I just thought it looked cool and edgy. I put it on my wrist and never thought about it again. But now, standing before Jesus, I could see that this symbol carried a spiritual weight that I'd never considered. Jesus said, "You have not understood the covenant power of what you wear. Some of these marks are innocent expressions of your journey, but others are doors you've opened without knowing what stands on the other side." I started to cry. The sorrow wasn't about being condemned. It was about the disconnect between what I thought I was doing and what was actually happening in the spiritual realm. I had wanted to honor God with my art. I genuinely believed that. But I had also been careless, arrogant even, assuming that intention was enough. I'd gotten tattoos without prayer. I'd created sacred designs without seeking God's guidance. I'd mixed spiritual symbols with artistic ego, and I'd never stopped to consider what that meant in eternity. Jesus looked at me with incredible gentleness and said, "Come with me. I must show you what marks truly mean in my kingdom." When he spoke those words, everything shifted. We left that initial space and entered into what I can only describe as a realm outside of time. It wasn't a physical place with geography or boundaries. It was more like consciousness itself, a space where truth was visible and lived. Jesus opened my spiritual understanding, and I began to see the history of marking from creation onward. I saw Adam and Eve in the garden, unmarked by ink or symbol, but glowing with the Father's image. There was no shame, no separation. They were clothed in light, marked only by God's design and purpose. Then I watched the fall happen. Sin entered like a crack in a mirror. The inward glory that marked humanity dimmed and fractured. For the first time, humans became aware of their nakedness, their flesh, their need for external covering. The image of God that marked them from within became clouded. Then Jesus showed me Cain. After he murdered Abel, God marked him, not with a tattoo in the way we think of them, but with a spiritual mark. A sign. A warning. A consequence that was given, not chosen. Jesus said to me, the first marking of humanity was not about beauty or self-expression. It was about covenant and consequence. I saw generations flash before me. Pagan tribes cutting their flesh in rituals to please their gods. Egyptians covering themselves in symbols to connect with the dead and the afterlife. Canaanites marking their children in blood for ritual purposes. Romans branding slaves with their master's seal to show ownership and control. Then came Israel. God chose them and set them apart. But he didn't command them to get tattoos. He commanded consecration, holiness, inner separation. The command came, "You are not like the nations around you." Jesus showed me Leviticus 19 verse 28 written in light, "Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord." I used to dismiss this verse completely. I told my clients it was part of the old covenant, that we live under grace now, not law. But standing in this realm with Jesus, I understood it differently. It wasn't about legalism. It was about ownership. It was about who had the authority to mark what was his. It was about bearing the imprint of something other than God himself. Jesus showed me the priests in the temple. They were marked only by anointing oil and holiness, not by symbols on their skin. The prophets carried fire in their bones, not designs on their bodies. The apostles bore scars from persecution, but those were marks given by God through their suffering, not marks they had chosen for themselves. Jesus turned to me and said, "My people have forgotten that they are already marked by me. They do not understand that to mark themselves is to attempt to write their own story on the body I have given them." I wanted to defend myself again, to explain that my tattoos, especially the religious ones, were about him. I wanted to tell him that I'd created crosses and scripture tattoos for hundreds of people, and it was all with good intention. But he simply looked at me and said, "Intention is not the same as revelation. What feels harmless on earth may carry weight in the spirit." He explained something that shook me to my core. All marks are visible in the spirit, both to heaven and to hell. Some tattoos are born of pain, some of pride, some of ignorance, but all carry a signature that exists beyond the physical. I realized in that moment that I'd never considered the spiritual implications of what I was doing. I'd been creating permanent marks on people's bodies without understanding their spiritual weight. Some people came to me with designs they'd found online. I'd never asked where those designs came from or what spiritual roots they had. I just made them look beautiful. Then Jesus said, "Now you must see what the enemy sees." The realm around us shifted, but not into darkness or evil. It was more like a veil was lifted. Jesus remained beside me, his light still present, but now I could perceive the spiritual reality that surrounds the physical world. I saw people walking through ordinary life, sitting in churches, praying, going to work, living their lives. But many of them had certain tattoos that glowed with a faint flickering energy in the spiritual realm. Some gave off confusion, others pride. Some pulsed with anger or sorrow. And I could see shadows clinging to those marks. Jesus explained that these weren't demons possessing people. These were permissions. Ancient, intelligent spirits that were patient and precise, feeding off the agreements that had been made through those marks. Some people had chosen a tattoo in complete ignorance that happened to be rooted in cult history, pagan worship, or rebellion. Even though they loved Jesus sincerely, they had unknowingly opened doors. I saw one young man with a lion tattoo. He'd gotten it for courage, but in the spiritual realm, I could see it mimicked a tribal sigil used in blood oaths centuries ago. That mark gave darkness access to his spiritual heritage in a way he'd never authorized. I saw a woman with a snake tattoo she'd gotten ironically as a teenager. It was beautiful and artistic, but in the spirit, I saw it twist every time she tried to worship, every time she lifted her hands in prayer. A spiritual serpent was mocking her devotion. I wanted to cry out that these people didn't know. They hadn't meant anything wrong by it. But Jesus said, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." Not all marks carry negative covenants, but many do, and covenants do not expire just because those who made them forget they exist. That struck me with the force of truth. I suddenly understood the weight of what I'd been doing professionally. Every tattoo I created without considering its spiritual implications was potentially opening a door for someone. Then Jesus showed me something that devastated me even more. He showed me influencers, believers with large followings on social media, displaying faith-based tattoos online. They'd share crosses, Bible verses, Hebrew words, creating an aesthetic of Christianity that looked beautiful and spiritual. But some of these designs were rooted in false doctrine or copied from sources that twisted scripture in subtle ways. Their followers would see these beautiful faith tattoos and copy them, thinking they were doing something good and spiritual. Thousands more would bear those marks in imitation, completely unaware that they were duplicating a design born in compromise or spiritual confusion. Jesus said, "They think it is art, but heaven sees agreement." Every mark made and every mark received is a signature written in the Spirit. I was barely breathing at this point. Jesus reached toward me and suddenly I saw my own tattoos again, but this time through spiritual eyes. I saw my dove tattoo, which I thought represented peace. But in the Spirit, I could see a spirit of religion mocking it, using it as a permission to keep me bound to religious works instead of authentic relationship with God. I saw my Sanskrit tattoo on my shoulder blade. I'd gotten it because I liked how it looked and someone told me it meant peace. But Jesus showed me that I'd taken it from a spiritual source I'd never researched, and it carried Sanskrit roots in Hinduism and Buddhism that conflicted with my faith in ways I'd never understood. But the worst was that small abstract symbol on my wrist. Jesus showed me where it came from originally. It was a sigil used in ancient rites for self-will, for rebellion against divine authority, for spiritual independence from God. Every time I looked at that tattoo, every time I told people it was just a personal design, I was making a silent agreement with that concept, self-will over God's will, my design over His design. I fell on my face before Him. Jesus, I didn't mean to. I didn't know. I was careless. I was proud. I thought my artistic vision was enough. His voice was firm but full of compassion. You are not condemned, but you must be cleansed. And you must understand what it means to bear my mark instead of your own. Then Jesus reached out with His hand, and I felt a wave of fire pass through me. It wasn't painful. It was purifying. Every part of me felt washed clean, like every cell of my spirit had been renewed. And then He showed me the next vision. I saw people who were truly surrendered to Jesus. Not perfect people. People who had made mistakes, lived messy lives, struggled with sin, but they were fully yielded to Him. Their bodies didn't glow because they were perfect. They glowed because they belonged completely to Him. And unlike the earthly tattoos I'd been seeing, these people bore no ink, but they radiated marks, spiritual marks etched not on skin, but on the soul itself. These marks weren't symbols of self-expression or rebellion. They were seals of obedience, covenants made with God, agreements that carried power. One person was marked with intercession. I watched, and every time this person prayed, demons fled. The mark gave their prayers authority in the spiritual realm. Another was marked with surrender. On earth, this person seemed ordinary, unremarkable. But in heaven, their name echoed like thunder. The mark of complete submission to God gave them power that the world couldn't see. Another was marked with purity. When temptation tried to cling to this person, it slid off as if blocked by invisible fire. The mark was stronger than the attraction to sin. Jesus said, "These are heaven's markings. They are not chosen by personal design. They are forged by devotion, by surrender, by the willingness to let me write the story of their lives instead of writing it themselves." I understood then what he was saying. The issue wasn't whether tattoos were allowed or forbidden. The issue was ownership. Who had authority over my body? Who had the right to write my story on my skin? Whose covenant was I living in? Jesus turned to me and said, "Megan, you were never meant to mark yourself. You were meant to be marked by me. The body you have been given is not a canvas for your self-expression. It is a temple where I dwell. Every permanent mark you place on it is a statement about who you belong to and what you believe about yourself." I looked at Jesus, trembling, and asked, "Can your mark cover what I've done? Can you heal the damage I've caused to myself and to others through the tattoos I've created?" He nodded once, slowly. "My blood is stronger than your ink. My power is greater than any mark you've made. Come to me, and I will remake you." Then he did something I'll never forget. He placed his hand over one of my tattoos, the one that burned in the spirit, the sigil of self-will. As he did, I saw it begin to change. It didn't vanish. It didn't erase. But its spiritual resonance shifted completely. What had been distorted and dark became redeemed. It was no longer a mark of rebellion. It became a testimony, a scar turned into a seal of mercy. Jesus said, "Because you have brought it into the light before me, I will use it. It will no longer speak rebellion. It will speak redemption. It will become a mark not of your will, but of my restoration." I wept, but not from shame. I wept from relief. I wept from gratitude. I had been so afraid that Jesus would ask me to erase myself, to undo my past, to pretend that the last 10 years of my life and my choices didn't happen. But instead, he was redeeming them. He wasn't shaming me. He was transforming what I had done. He said, "I am not asking you to carry shame. I am asking you to carry meaning." The tattoos on your body now carry a new story, not the story you wrote, but the story I am writing through you. The realm shifted again. Now I could see the church, not a building, but the body of Christ across the earth. I could see people marked in two different ways. Some carried marks they had chosen, marks born of self-expression, culture, rebellion, pride, identity politics, spiritual confusion. These marks flickered and pulsed with confusion. Other people carried marks that heaven had placed, marks of obedience, sacrifice, intimacy with God, surrender. These marks burned with fire. Jesus showed me what was happening as the refiner's fire moved through the church. The marks that were not born of him began to fade, unless they were offered up, surrendered, brought into the light before him. People were laying down their self-expressions, their self-made identities. Some of it was literal tattoos, but much of it was deeper, identities they'd created, ambitions they'd pursued, ideologies they'd embraced, labels they'd given themselves. And as they surrendered these things, Jesus marked them anew, not with visible marks, but with power, purity, and presence. Jesus turned to me one final time. "Megan, I am not asking for bare skin. I am asking for surrendered hearts. I am asking my people to understand that they are already marked. They are already written upon. They belong to me, and every mark they place on their bodies is a statement about that belonging." He looked deeper into me, past my thoughts, past my emotions, down to the place where my will lived. But if they would ask me first before they marked themselves, I would answer. I always answer the cry of surrender. Ask me before you mark. Ask me before you create designs for others. Ask me before you attempt to write any story on your own body. Because the story I have written for you is greater than anything you could imagine. He placed his hand over my heart one more time. I felt it, a burning seal. Not for pain or punishment, but for belonging. And with that, the vision began to fade. I knew I was being sent back. I had seen the truth. Now I had to return. I was completely undone. Every part of me had been laid bare before Jesus. No masks, no defenses, no excuses possible. Yet I had never felt more safe or more loved. I fell to my knees in the light, trembling. Lord, I whispered, I don't deserve to come back. I don't deserve to speak for you. I've led others into things I didn't understand. I wore marks I never asked you about. I created marks for others without seeking your wisdom. I've been proud and careless and spiritually reckless. Jesus stepped toward me. His presence didn't crush me. It steadied me. It grounded me in truth. Mercy is not earned, he said. It is carried. You will carry it now. He reached out and touched my shoulder. I felt fire, holy, clean, consuming but not destructive. It didn't scorch my skin. It sealed something in my spirit. His hand left no visible burn. But deep in my being, I knew something eternal had been marked there, a new signature, not of ink or rebellion, but of mercy and mission. You will not return to shame them, Jesus said. You will return to awaken them. You will tell them what I have shown you. You will tell them that I see beyond ink, and I am calling them higher. You will tell them that they are already marked by me, and everything else is secondary. I wept, not from guilt, but from gratitude and from the weight of calling. Because I had been shown the truth, and still he called me his. Still he was sending me back. Still he was asking me to speak. And then, without warning, the light began to fade. The realm shifted. The weight of glory lifted. I felt myself being drawn downward, back toward time, back toward gravity, back toward breath. He was sending me back to the body I'd left, back to the world I thought I understood. But this time I wasn't returning alone. I was returning marked. I could feel it, the mark that Jesus had placed on my spirit. No one else could see it, but I could feel it. It was like a seal on my soul, a signature that heaven had written and hell could feel. That mark changed everything. I got out of the hospital after a week. I went through rehabilitation. I went through counseling. I surrendered my life to Jesus in a way I never had before. And I never returned to tattooing. The truth I learned in that realm is this: God has already written your story. He has already marked you as his own. Every permanent mark you place on your body is a statement about ownership and covenant. Make sure you know what you're agreeing to before you mark yourself. Ask Jesus first. Surrender your body to him instead of using it as a canvas for your own vision. That's what saved my life. That's what continues to save my life every day. That's what I'm called to tell others. You are already marked by God. Don't trade his seal for something he never asked for.